I saw this golden arrow come out of my mouth. As I spoke, it was flying directly towards the center of his forehead, and as soon as it got about 2 inches away from there, his angel stepped forward and snatched that arrow out of the air. And at first I thought, whose side are you on? An empire is anything that we build out of the knowledge of good and evil. I see this structure come out of me, this set of statues, a stained glass window of people, and I look at first and I'm like, oh, that looks beautiful. But the more I look at it, the more I realize, oh, this is my idea of what ministry is. And I saw hundreds and hundreds of these little strings going out and attaching to all of these different structures that are around people. And I could even see them attached to my structure. I asked the Lord, what is this? And he said, this is certainty. Principalities are attached to culture. They come into prominence or authority because authority gets given over to them. I looked down and for the very first time in my life, saw Jesus. Jesus just leaned forward and he kissed her on the forehead. And the second he kissed her on the forehead, every single link in the chain exploded like firecrackers.
Have there been times when you've turned it on and wish you wouldn't have? Everyone wants to get to the high places, but if you want to go high, you first have to go deep. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to the Deep End. We have Jake Supe.
Yes, sir.
Here in town, hailing from Franklin.
5 minutes down the road.
It's a long drive for you. We have one of our really good friends, Blake Healy, back in town.
Happy to be here.
Yes.
And Blake is amazing. For the record, I don't have a copy of the book because I keep giving them away, but he wrote a book called The Veil. This probably wins the prize for most times I've cried while reading a book. I just remember reading it on an airplane, flying back from Sarasota. I think I was reading this book, and yeah, just the stories in there that made me feel emotional. And I was like, "What is this? Emotions? Why is this happening to me?" But it changed my life. We've given away so many copies. I'm going to give your bio real fast. Blake Healy is a renowned author, speaker, spiritual teacher known for his ability to
You're making Blake and everyone laugh.
see in the spiritual realm. I think your team probably gave this to us.
Probably.
We have to put
Call
renowned
me
in there.
renowned if you have to.
Well, the problem is, if we don't say that you're renowned, people won't know.
That's true. I guess so.
They won't know. Since childhood, Blake has had the ability to see in the spirit realm, angels, demons, other spiritual entities and phenomena. And through his books and teachings, and he's speaking, and he's helping people understand and inviting them to grow in their awareness of the fact that God is good and that God is sovereign, and showing people the kindness and the nature of heaven and the nature of Jesus through understanding how the spiritual world works. So I'm grateful for your work. I'm sure millions of people are. Thanks for being here again.
I'm glad to be here with you guys.
Round 2.
That's right.
You must have liked the first round a little bit.
Clearly.
I did. It was
Yeah,
fun.
it was fun.
Hey, so you're about to publish another book.
Yes, a new book called Through the Veil.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
Through
Talk
the
to
veil.
us. What is this one?
Yeah. So I'll tell the kind of the story that was the impetus for creating this book, and just kind of talk about, because it's been really, almost a 5-year journey of kind of getting this book. I was working on some of this even when I was working on my previous book, but had an experience again, a little over 5 years ago where late one night got an email. Almost never check my email at night, but I just for some reason had a compulsion to. I walked down there, opened it up, I got an email from one of my closest friends, and I saw that it had been sent to over 100 people, and opened it up, and basically what he was saying is that, hey, I no longer consider myself a Christian. I'm going to be leaving our church, no longer believe in Jesus, and hey, this is just something I've decided to do. And I was super crushed, just because this was one of my closest friends. He had been a leader at our church for many, many years, and
Oh, wow.
I was, of course, hurt by the decision, but I was also kind of personally hurt just because we'd been close enough friends that we had talked with different ways he'd struggled with his faith and how to kind of marry that with his kind of rationality and things like that. And but this was kind of like, oh man, someone hit skip on the DVD or something like I know it's an old reference now, but that like, hey, we were talking about some of this and now you're just gone. It's like waking up one morning and just a room in your house is empty, kind of thing. And so I didn't message him back right away just because I knew that lots of people were going to be saying lots of things to him for a while. And also I kind of wanted to work through the part of myself that was personally hurt by the way that he communicated it, because I didn't want that to taint, whatever I would have to say for him. So I waited about 3 months, which is kind of way too long and not long enough at the same time. And sent him a text, said, "Hey, can we grab some coffee?" And he said, "Sure." And so I drove up to the coffee house, and I walked in, and he looked exactly the same as he always had. I don't know why I expected him to look different. I still saw his personal angel standing next to him, looking the same as it always had, and even it looked the same. Although maybe something in his expression looked a little bit sad. That also might have been me, projecting that a little bit. I see personal angels with everyone I've ever met, whether they're close to God or not close to God, and whether they are doing good or not good in their life, they still love and serve God's purposes in that person's life. And so I sat down, and I'm not a big arguer. Even when I talk about seeing the Spirit stuff, I don't like putting a lot of effort into trying to convince people that what I have to say is legitimate or to validate or whatever. I'd much rather just present what I have to say, and people can use their own discernment to decide what they feel about that. And that's how I am with regard to defending the faith and things like that too. So I didn't really have these theological arguments that I wanted to throw at him, but as I had thought for those 3 months, I kind of had these 5 points, these 5 things that I wanted to say that were just kind of I would regret if I didn't say these things, and so we chatted, and I actually started by just letting him know that I was, personally hurt by hey, we've been good friends. And then, hey, I'm just one of these 100 people that get this email. I feel like we were closer than that. And he was able to apologize for that and kind of validate my need there. And I felt that kind of last bit of pain sort of, resolve. And so I felt good going forward. And so I kind of built up, let him know, hey, I've got these 5 things I want to say. I'm not going to try to argue with you, but here it is. And so I built up to the first point, and as soon as I opened my mouth for the first kind of keystone point, I saw this golden arrow come out of my mouth as I spoke it, and this arrow was pure gold, tip to tip. The head was gold, the shaft was gold, the fletching on the end was pure gold. Came out of my mouth. It was flying directly towards the center of his forehead. And as soon as it got about 2 inches away from there, his angel very quickly and skillfully stepped forward and snatched that arrow out of the air. And at first I thought, whose side are you on?
Right.
Yeah.
And, I have enough background experience to know that this wasn't a last minute angel rebellion or something, but I was still confused. I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Totally threw me. I very rarely react to the stuff that I see in the Spirit just because I don't want to
Freak people
be
out.
weird.
Yeah.
But that totally threw me. I stumbled over my words, dropped off mid-sentence, kind of recovered and, moved on to the second point. Came to the second point. Once again, just as I kind of spoke the keynote phrase, golden arrow came out of my mouth going directly towards his forehead. And once again, angel snatched it out of the air so that it had 2 arrows in its hand. Now, I was starting to get disturbed a little bit. I'm like, what's this is so weird. What's going on? And, more than that, also, I could see my friend's body language that he was getting a little bit more reserved, getting a bit more defensive, And so because of this weird spiritual thing going on, I kind of blurted out the last 3 points kind of from a more emotional place, and just let those out. And I watched 3 golden arrows come out of my mouth. These were heading directly towards the center of his chest. And this time the angel stepped in front of him, and all 3 of those arrows went directly into its chest and didn't touch him at all. And so the conversation wrapped up. I don't know what I was hoping for exactly, but it definitely didn't see much impact, on him. We committed to, doing our best to stay friends and to stay connected in this process, but that was it. And so He left first. I hung around for a little while, just kind of sitting and thinking. And after a bit, I got up and I went to my car, sat down in the driver's seat. And as soon as I sat down and turned to my right, I saw my friend's angel sitting in the passenger seat, 3 arrows in its chest, 2 arrows in its hand.
What?
And it pulled the 3 arrows out of its chest so that it now had 5 arrows in its hand. It set them head down in the cup holder between the seats. And with this kind of genuine this sigh of kind of sadness, it looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, but your arrows are too dirty. You're going to have to try again another time."
What?
And then it left. So,
Jeez.
yeah, I thought about that for a long time. I ran all the things through my head of, okay, my friend had made a decision, maybe he was just stuck in his decision and didn't want to hear what I had to say, But if that was the case, I would have expected the arrows to bounce off of him or to be deflected by him in some way, not an angel who's definitely a servant of God's purposes, block and deflect this thing. I thought, well, okay, maybe some of that personal hurt had, stuck around, and that was what was doing it. But I really did my best to try to work through that beforehand. So that doesn't, really make sense, or, I'm sure maybe there was something left, but I definitely did my best, And, then I thought maybe there's something wrong with my theology or my rhetoric or whatever else. But again, I couldn't really think of what would be wrong with it. I still kind of believe all the things that I had said in that moment. The part that really struck me the most is that even though the angel said that, even as I looked down at them in the cup holder, those arrows looked perfect to me. They were perfectly gold end to end. I couldn't see any dirt on them at all. And so that experience really kind of led me into a much broader and wider discovery and conversation around like what, and even though that was obviously an experience that was specific to me, but I think we've all had that experience, maybe not about that exact same situation, but you see something godly, you see something in God's nature, you know something of the truth of his kingdom, of his nature, of the Bible, and you go to share it with someone and it just kind of falls flat. It just doesn't land. It doesn't have the impact. It's not received. And yeah, again, just like me, there could be, they're not ready to receive it, or maybe I'm missing something or whatever else. But there's also these times that I think we all experience. It's like, why didn't this good thing, come through the veil? It's right here. Why isn't it working? And so it led me on this whole journey, which turned into this book. And so the answer to that question is really, something I've just been wrestling with and struggling with for quite some time now.
Did you ever get an answer on why your arrows were dirty?
I did. And I think probably, well, to explain it effectively, I'll have to tell this this other story. So to make the whole of the book very, very short, the Lord really led me down this path, and we talked about this a little bit last time when I was on the podcast. But really understanding this kind of biblical concept of empires, that the spiritual struggle that we have in the world is not just a struggle between God and the enemy. Such a struggle wouldn't be much of a problem because God can handle that quite easily. The struggle, in fact, I would suggest that most of our struggle is really with ourselves. And this, to address it very briefly, if we go all the way back to the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve ate this forbidden fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That wasn't just wrong because God said not to do it. It was also a fundamental violation of the order of how God had created a relationship with us. It was a choice that, hey, I want to decide what's good and evil for myself. And this, is exacerbated as people go out and begin to multiply and start founding cities. Cain kills Abel, goes on to found the first city. The Garden of Eden is a picture of God's kingdom on the earth, and we were responsible to perpetuate that garden, to care for it, not to build a garden of our own. And even the founding of cities, the founding of great empires, is a picture of what we build out of our own knowledge of good and evil. And if you go to the Tower of Babel, for example, it's like, based on, we're going to build our own way to heaven. Mm-hmm. And God even says like, they're going to be able to do it, Mm-hmm. But again, it's founded on the knowledge of good and evil. And so he undermined that. And, if you even go back and study some of these ancient empires, the Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Mesopotamians, all these people, you can almost see, I like to kind of compare it to like this inter-empirical rap battle of like who has the best laws, the who's got the best set of laws, the most. That's why even in the Bible you'll see these like really specific, detailed, like, okay, well, hey, yeah, your law has a rule if someone's donkey gets hit by a cart. Well, our law has if someone's foot gets stepped on a donkey while a cart is crossing in front of them. Look at how awesome
We've thought of
It's a
everything.
one-upping
look at our
of everything.
justice. Like, oh, look how thorough it is.
Yeah.
And this, you kind of see this kind of thing going back and forth. And again, that's rooted in the knowledge of good and evil. Let's build what's right and wrong from our own perspective. And Jesus is really the answer to the opposite of that, of hey, here's what it looks like to build a kingdom like God. Here is what God's kingdom looks like. And it's the way that one would perpetuate power and rule on the earth. The way that Jesus represented it is almost upside down and backwards from the way that we would think that you perpetuate power. It's actually the least that are the greatest. It's that we should actually care for the weak, for the humble, for the poor, for the widow, the orphan. And it's just completely inverse and backwards. And so now we live in an age where we constantly, both within the church, without the church, on a big scale between countries and worlds, even as small as all the way down to our families, we have this temptation to have our own righteousness, our own sense of right and wrong, and build on that. And, I got the answer to why those arrows didn't work when I was studying this concept. And I was studying two different prophets who were both sent by God to address some of these empires. And you can read the story for yourself, but the prophets I was comparing was Jonah and Daniel. And Jonah is, in many ways, could be titled Jonah, How Not to Be a Prophet, because it's a very funny book. And, he's like, he doesn't want to go to Nineveh, goes in the opposite direction. We all know the story, gets thrown off the boat, eaten by a fish, says this very poetic sort of prayer to God where he doesn't quite apologize for not going the right direction, but he reminds God of how great a protector he is and all of that, and then ends up, going to Nineveh finally, gives the worst version of a prophetic word ever. It's like, 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown, and that's it. And he goes out and kind of like a movie, the city really repents, and there's a huge, despite his poor presentation, the city repents. It's this great, turning, and God decides not to destroy the city. And we kind of get to chapter 4 of the book of Jonah, and we find Jonah is angry with God, and we find out why he ran away. It's kind of like a movie where it flashes back to an earlier conversation that we didn't hear, where he's like, hey, I knew that you were going to be merciful and righteous to these people, and I that's why I didn't want to come. So he realized, like, he's not scared of Nineveh. It was, he didn't want them. He knew what would happen, and he didn't want them to be saved. Now, you do a little bit of research. Nineveh is the capital city of the Assyrian Empire. They were a notoriously brutal empire. They were one of the first empires that really made a business of conquering other peoples. Some of the others did this, but they perfected it. They were really brutal to anyone who would rise up against them, and were very, very cruel, very violent. And so you can understand, maybe why he wouldn't want them to be saved. But God is kind of sitting there, giving him this sight lesson that we see of, this plant that grows up. And he's like, hey, you care more about this plant that was giving you shade than you care about these people. There's over 120,000 people in there who don't know their right hand from their left hand. And he's basically coaching Jonah, like, hey, there's people in there. Like, you want me to blow that city up? And it ends kind of with a cliffhanger ending where we don't really see what the resolution is with regard to just, Jonah being there and being angry. And to me, this is a picture of a prophet who is sent to release God's word to a wicked empire, but it's a prophet who has not been transformed by God's nature. He knew enough about God's nature to know that God was going to be merciful, but he did not allow God's nature to transform him into also becoming merciful. Now, Daniel's the exact opposite. Daniel could probably be titled How to Be a Prophet. He's a prophet that's also sent into the middle of a wicked empire. In fact, the successor to the Assyrians, the Babylonians. And I always kind of zoom in on this one story where right after the whole fiery furnace fiasco, Nebuchadnezzar's built a big statue of himself, and hey, bow down or I'll kill you, and throws his friends in the fire, and they're protected by God. Nebuchadnezzar has this dream, and we'll find out later that this dream is a dream of judgment. Like, hey, for your pride and your arrogance, God's gonna humble you. And the way that Daniel chooses to present this judgmental prophetic word is evident of a prophet who not only is obedient to God, but has also been transformed by his nature. He basically says, hey, I wish I was giving this to someone else. I'm sorry to bring you this harsh word. I wish I was giving this to one of your enemies. And goes in to explain that Nebuchadnezzar is going to lose his mind for a period of time. He's going to be humbled, and then he's going to know that God is God and he's not. And just the difference in attitude. And Jonah's story ends with an obscure ending on the side of a hill. Daniel served king after king after king, influencing the heart of a wicked empire with God's nature. And I'd studied this several times, and I was sitting in my office reading this over again, kind of contemplating this and kind of realizing that, okay, there's something in me that's not yet transformed. And the minute I had that thought, I just heard the Lord say, you were more like Jonah than you were like Daniel in that moment, even though my intent was to have a right heart and a right attitude. And he said to me very kindly, but very directly, hey, I was thinking this, like, hey, those arrows look perfect to me. And he said, that's not how they look to me. You actually couldn't even see how they really looked, because those were not arrows from my kingdom towards your friend. That was arrows from your kingdom to his. And justifiably, a heavenly servant had to protect him from the arrows of a foreign empire.
Wow.
And so even though my intent was good, something in my presentation or where that came from wasn't rooted in his kingdom. It was rooted in my own kingdom. And so that's why those arrows didn't land.
What a warning for right now. The timing of that book seems to be very prophetic, because you've been working on this for a while.
Yeah, I've been working on it slowly for 3 years, and then really bringing it together last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I want to go into some stories, but I've been praying a lot over the past couple of weeks about how God wants me to behave at different levels, because of how divisive everything is right now, and how you could literally you could say the right thing and it still come out wrong. And so I've been very quiet, but I got this picture this week, and I think you do this really well, because the question people are going to have is like, well, how do I find out if I'm
right, like what should you have done instead?
Yeah, like you couldn't see it, so people are like, well, great,
everyone's overthinking everything now.
Yeah. So I was asking before you even share the story, I've been working through this week, because I'm like, how do I know if my heart is like God's? Because sometimes it feels like it's like God's, and then I realized after the fact that it wasn't like God's, and I wouldn't have known in the middle. And I got this picture actually last night of like a piece of dirt, like a garden with no water, and it eventually becomes hard and dries up, and it's difficult to get into. You can't put a shovel in it. It's just dry ground. It's like difficult. And then the Lord was like, that's like the human heart, and a heart without living water presence becomes hard. And God was basically like, there's nothing I can do for your heart if you don't spend time in my presence. Like you can try to think good things and memorize scripture and all this stuff, but if you're not sitting every day and just sitting to be with me, you're going to be like, your heart's going to be like ground fertile, but then it becomes hard because there's no water. And I was like, that's the secret. Instead of constantly trying to intellectually be like, am I like God or am I not like God? Sometimes the secret is just like every day for an hour or 30 minutes, whatever, worship and ask God to spend time with you. Yeah. And you'll naturally just begin to have the heart of God.
Absolutely. I genuinely think if there's one key, that's it. And it's funny because we, especially in the West, we're so, and it's not a bad thing, but we can get so focused on, okay, what's the methodology? What's the step-by-step process?
Yes.
What is the
formula?
What is the framework? What is the formula? And again, people can come against formulas and stuff, and it's fair, but they're good and very useful in many respects. But there's some things that you just can't quantify in that way, and when you try to, you actually undo the very thing. It really is as simple as, what can I do to spend time with Jesus more?
Yeah. And
again, you have to almost avoid the formula thinking with that. It's like, okay, that means I need to just read my Bible. That means I just need to sit here quietly and pray. I like to equate it a lot to like a marriage where, William James, who's a great American author and a great kind of apologist and things like that. And one of the things that he said when kind of defending the existence of God is that there are certain things that we know are real but are completely unquantifiable. And the one example he has to use is love between either a couple or even just between friends. If you go to your best friend and say, well, show me the evidence that you love me, we can all recognize that immediately that's going to damage the feeling of love that you have. And also we can easily recognize that no matter what they say, I could immediately kind of undermine that and say, well, that was for other reasons. Well, hey, I did this for you. I did that for you. I spent time with you. You could immediately undermine any of those very easily with all kinds of other presumptionary things. Love is this invisible thing that we can see evidence of, but there can't be proof of it. There can just be more evidence. And it's kind of the same, if you want to be close to your spouse, saying, oh, yeah, spend time together, go on dates, do activities together, grow and learn together. All that is good. And those are good formulas that you should probably follow. But we can all very easily imagine that I could do all those things and it be something that actually disconnects us rather than connects us, or can be something that's just done out of duty and not actually doing that. And so I think we just kind of have to accept that. It's like, spending time with God and spending time with Jesus so that we can see who he is more, so that we can be like him more, is the answer. But it's not automatic. It's something where we have to have that discovery of, hey, what does it look like to be with him? And am I actually moving closer when I do this, or am I moving further away? And engaging in that mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes if you're watching this and you're like a entrepreneur or business owner, it will feel intellectually, before you get into it, like a waste of time. It would feel unproductive. Because I've started making it like a real point, like to just sit and not ask God questions, but just be like, hey, can I just spend some time in your presence? And then when I come out of that, or like the next day, I'll be like, I don't have time to do that. Like I need instructions. I need like, I have questions for him, but I don't have the time to just spend with them. And then I was having a moment with God, and he wanted to talk to me about me. And I was like, no, I'm good. I need to know what to do about this. And it wasn't working. I was like, you ever have those moments where you're like, I'm going to spend time with God, and then you're like, this isn't working. Nothing's happening. Certainly. So I was like, I'm just going to move on and read my Bible, because that's like second best. If you can't get God to talk to you, just read the Bible. And it was, I think it's in 2 Corinthians where Paul's going off, and he's like, does the formed tell the person who formed it how to do business? Like, do you? And I was like, oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm telling God what is most important to talk about.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, there's quick conviction. I'm going to go back and try this again.
Wow.
But as much as like the show is, we love talking about the stories. Like I love hearing the stories, especially Sears, man, y'all are a trip. But we have to be so careful that we don't create an appetite for something that's not Jesus.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
like sometimes you just have to come down to the main thing, which is like, look, if you don't know anything that happens in the spirit world at all, and you never hear another story, but you spend time with Jesus, you won a lottery. Like you've won big time.
Absolutely.
But on that note, let's talk about some stories.
Love it.
The disclaimer. Let's get into it. Is there anything crazy? Like the story you told last time that you hadn't shared before about you on the lawnmower was crazy, bro.
Yeah.
crazy. And I thought about that for weeks.
Yeah.
Where I was like, man, God, I need forgiveness for being stupid and just being in my flesh.
Yeah.
But have you had any other unique experiences that you haven't had time to share? Or
yeah, there's one that comes to mind that feels very pertinent right now. And again, it's as I've been in this kind of empire building motif, and how we can kind of check ourselves with regard to, hey, am I just building up my own way of thinking? For this book, I wanted to kind of do research, or at least my kind of research on how social media affects us. In my third book, Indestructible, is a spiritual warfare book, I had a section in there where I talked about media, how it affects us, and how like watching movies and reading books, listening to music, everything like that, and kind of had this open idea of it's if you think a good way to think of it is kind of like a diet of, hey, it's not wrong to have a slice of cake every now and again, or to drink some soda, but if that's your entire diet, it's going to start harming you. And also, we just have to recognize that hey, some people, like sugar and certain foods, affects them way more than it does other people. And so for some people, it's like, yeah, I can't watch any non-Christian media because it really does affect me. And others, maybe people who are called to the arts or things like that, might have a much higher tolerance for that because they're able to kind of engage with it from a more structural place rather than just connecting with it emotionally. And so thinking of it that way, and I almost started writing about social media in that book, but I pulled back last minute just because I'm like, there's too much to say here. And so if media, traditional media, books, movies, music, all those kinds of things is like a diet, then social media is like a 24-hour buffet being fired out of a fire hose. Like it's, and again, I use social media, not a lot, as anyone who looks for me on social media finds out. And so again, same thing. I don't think it's evil. However, it is just so rapid fire. And again, in this concept of building empires, there's empires that are the nations that we live in, the large cultures that we live in, the traditions that we live in, the ways of thinking. But there's also the small empires that are even just in our own mind, our idea of what's right and wrong. And every time I see someone scrolling through social media, I see that fire hose building up their empire. I was doing research, and so I was traveling, sitting in an airport, and so I was just looking around. A lot of people scroll through social media while they're sitting at the airport, and so I'm just looking around, seeing what's going on in the spirit as all these people are around. And so there's this guy who's just a couple rows of seats in front of me, just in the airport lobby right before the gate, and he's sitting there, and I see over his shoulder, see what he's looking at. It's a popular, very kind of masculine sort of podcast, and he's looking at it. And as he's watching it, I see this statue sitting on his shoulders, and the statue looks like him, but it looks like a kind of hyper masculinized version of him. His guy was a little, mid-weight, mid-age. And maybe kind of guy who looked like maybe he used to be an athlete, kind of thing, but not so much anymore. And but this statue was like hyper masculine, square jaw, big muscles, looking tough. And as he was watching this, I just saw like as if concrete was being sprayed out of his phone, building up this statue even bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point that if it were real, it would have crushed him. Like it was huge. And as it was sitting there, I saw a woman come up and start talking to him. Just by dynamics, it looked like it was his wife. And I was far enough, I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could tell that her posture was she was either upset about something or whatever else. And he was definitely feeling defensive. And in actuality, he was kind of like cringing away in this kind of passive sort of way. But this statue just like doubled in size instantly, like started leaning down towards the woman in this very aggressive, like sort of pose. And I could just see how this empire, this idea of what would be idealistic to be, was putting pressure on him to be a certain way, to the point that he ended up kind of yelling at her and kind of outbursting in the middle of this situation. I turned to my right, and just down a few rows, there was a lady with a very colorful hair and a lot of tattoos and this different, exotic sort of clothes. And I couldn't see what she was scrolling on, but as she was doing that, again, I saw this structure coming up around her that looked very artistic and creative. It almost looked kind of like the shape of a tree, but it had a little bit more kind of hard lines than that kind of organic picture suggests. It was made of different pieces of metal and feathers, and just kind of like this very abstract, messy, but in a way beautiful, kind of art display. And I was just watching again as she's scrolling through whatever she's scrolling through, pieces being added to that, other colors, other patterns, other materials, just getting pieces of fabric, just getting all kind of haphazardly kind of slapped together on this thing. And so I wasn't immediately like able to make sense of that, or what is that, or is it just like a mishmash of different beliefs or whatever else. And so I was going to be preaching at a church, and so I got my notes out, got my Bible out to kind of double check. I had everything marked down the way that I wanted to, and as soon as I set my Bible down on the table between us, I saw her eyes flick up, see that, and I saw this brief like look of disgust on her face. And immediately this structure that had been somewhat tree-like just started bending towards me in this very aggressive sort of way. Almost looked like a scorpion stinger, the way that it was like leaning toward me. And to be honest, this isn't normally my reaction, but I felt this kind of flush of offense go through me, like, hey, you don't know me, you don't know how I construct my faith, you don't know the way that I treat people. I don't know what you do or don't have going on, but it's just a Bible, and as I'm having this like flush of offense go through me, I see this structure come out of me, and it is this set of statues, a stained glass window of people. One is a person studying the Bible, one is a person ministering, praying to someone. And I look at first and I'm like, oh, that looks beautiful. But the more I look at it, the more I realize like, oh, this is my idea of what ministry is. This is what my idea of being a Christian is. And I can feel that it's like when you, I guess this is a weird example, but like it's like when you look at AI art, it's like, oh, it all looks fine, but there's something wrong about it that I can't put my finger on, or there is a fakeness here that I maybe can't explain exactly unless I really look at specific details, but it just feels wrong to my brain. It was that kind of feeling where it's like this is not right, but this is accurate to my way of thinking. And so I was feeling kind of overwhelmed by that. My eyes started kind of popping around. I just see everyone on their things with all these structures being built up around them. And so I kind of lift my head to kind of, normally I can just easily turn it off or turn it on with regard to seeing the Spirit. But sometimes when I kind of get on a roll, it's like hard to shut it down. So yeah. I just lifted my head and looked up. And as I looked up, I was somewhat surprised to see this principality sitting there over the airport, and I couldn't see its face. It was covered by this kind of dark blue hood. It had these hands that were out like this, and they were also this dark blue color. And I saw hundreds and hundreds of these little strings going out and attaching to all of these different structures that are around people, and it would just bend and move its fingers in this very skilled way, just pulling, adjusting, changing the way that those structures grew just ever so subtly. And I could even see them attached to my structure at the same time. And I asked the Lord, like, what is this? And he said, this is certainty. And he said, it's a principality that tries to use our need to be right, to be just, to be right in our beliefs, or again, our idea of what's right and wrong, our idea of good and evil, and to try to pull and bend and twist that, manipulate that, of course, to ways that will bring destruction to us and to others. And at least in that moment, I was like, I'm obviously feeling weird from this little moment that I had. I'm like,
you just found out a principality was messing with you. No big deal.
Yeah, it happens more often than you think. But maybe get to that another time. But I think I said this last time. Like when rather than just like casting out a principality or praying against it, not terrible things to do, but the most effective thing is principalities are attached to culture. They come into prominence or authority because authority gets given over to them with, in this case, our need for certainty, for rightness, for our version of truth, and so I always feel the best thing to do is to come in the opposite spirit. And so I was sitting there, I was like, what's the opposite of certainty? And at first it's like, well, okay, uncertainty. But then I thought, what's the godly version of that? And I thought, it's faith. Like faith isn't certainty. It's trust in the nature of God. It's the substance of things hoped for, it's the evidence for things not seen. It's this thing where it's like, I don't know all the answers, but I trust in you, and I trust in your nature, and I trust even in this kind of overwhelming scene I'm seeing of all these structures being rapid fire built up in people's lives, that how to even deal with that or change that, is overwhelming to think about. But okay, realizing like, I don't know how to help that. I don't know how to change that. I can only just have trust and faith in you and in your nature. And even as I started engaging with that mentally, I watched about a dozen of those strings that were attached to my structure from this principality just twing, 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 like pop loose.
Wow. That sucks. I love certainty.
Me too. Yeah. It's very appealing.
Man. What do you think about that, bro?
I'm just like, well, it sounds like I processed it through the lens of like, dude, what do you like day to day? Like, how do you even like live your life normally after that? Like you're like trying to have a conversation with somebody and someone wants to like debate you about something, and you're like, yeah, I'm certain. Because then it's like, but if you really get to the root of it, like you don't really know. Do you really like? But then my question is like, at that point, what do you do? What do you say? Like, how do you function as a normal human? Like, principally, it makes sense to me. Like, I understand you have to have faith. It's more important than certainty. But then how do you function? Like, how does that trickle into everyday life?
Yeah. If I were to kind of like, take out the knife and try to like carefully separate, because one thing that is interesting, like I can maybe share a story about this before, but an overreaction to a principality is just as harmful as like just being stuck in its plan necessarily, because one of the things that's so important to understand about these empires is they're not all bad. Like usually it's built on part of God's kingdom, facets of his nature, facets of his goodness, but it's just missing some other components. So all of these empires, any empire in history, any country, any policy, any structure now will produce some good and some bad. It will produce, and this is the story all throughout Scripture, like all these empires produce justice for some and injustice for others. And that will always be the outcome of a human empire, because it's not God's, And so it's important to recognize like, okay, I don't have to just, because I think it would be a bad reaction to go full like, nothing can be known, everything is true, all things are permissible.
We all know those types of people. We're like, dude, can't even have a normal conversation about the color of the sky.
Right, exactly. It's
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think instead it does what it invites us to do is to soften some of those places, to humble ourselves, to operate in the fear of the Lord, which a friend of mine has always said, the best definition I've ever heard, at least, of the fear of the Lord is living in the revelation that He's God and I'm not, and kind of recognizing like, okay, I probably can't be certain about anything. That need for certainty is actually kind of like that need for McDonald's, or where it's like, okay, this is actually a thing that has been fed in me. And probably in our age, it's easier to be certain. It's never been easier to become wise in your own eyes. Like you can find 300 really great people who will verify your opinion, and now you can get an AI to be very agreeable to you and tell you how right you are about everything. And so realizing that feeling is, we've been fed in it, and kind of a drug version of it, where it's like, oh, I feel certain, I feel confident. and I don't even consider the idea that I might be wrong or there might be nuance or a detail. And so I don't think that confidence is wrong. I don't think that conviction is wrong. Like, and some of it is even just kind of changing our language of like, hey, I'm not certain about this, but I am very convicted that this is important.
Right.
That this is right, or some facet of this is right. And you can even see how that little change in language, it loosens it up from this is right. And if you take anything from this, you have, offended me and offended my entire family.
Right.
Into this is really important to me. That all of a sudden there's openness for a discussion with someone about this thing, rather than we are just, being certain and dismissing anything that contradicts what our view is, versus like, okay, this is important to me. I'm very convicted by this, but you're very convicted by this. How do these relate? Are these in opposition, or are these just different parts of the same whole?
Yeah. Can we sit on empires for a second? It's a recurring theme, but there's certain nuances that I don't quite understand. So one of them would be, as it pertains to it seems like you're saying like certain empires are facets of God's personality. Mm-hmm. Are you saying that we each have our own empires, or that we're oftentimes connected to other people's? Like, how does God look at the structures? Is it like it's good for us to have our own empire as long as it's under submission to the Holy Spirit? How do you break that down?
Yeah. So if I were to describe what I mean by empire, obviously we have the traditional kind of like, that's a broad reaching culture, government.
I think some people
power.
maybe associate like empire with evil, kingdom with good.
Yeah. I would say an empire is anything that we build out of the knowledge of good and evil. And so it is whenever we decide what is right and wrong for ourselves, versus being led by God in how he wants to construct his kingdom, his empire, if you want to call it that. And so it is this interesting balance, because fundamental to our nature is we're made in the image of God. So we're made to think like he does. We're made to build things that are actually in alignment with his kingdom, which is why so many empires, from the very small empire of this is how we do right and wrong in our family, this is how I do right and wrong personally, these are the beliefs, the values, the creeds, the codes, that some of us have those maybe very formal in our minds. Some of them have us it's very more instinctual, but that is my code of justice, essentially. And then our family code of justice, our city code of justice, and so on and so forth. And like I said, and this is the part that I honestly still wrestle with is, okay, the temptation is like, okay, I just don't think anything then. God, tell me what to think.
Exactly.
But that's not what he created us to be and to do. But instead, to me, the real answer is am I in a posture of discipleship? Jesus is my, rabbis, at least in Jesus' time, they would have their set of beliefs, their code, their values, their teachings. And a disciple would follow them around. He'd live with them. They would, travel together. And I'm learning how you do things. I'm learning how you value things. And we're asking questions. And that would, it's still to this day much more common in Jewish culture than it is in Christian culture, of like, arguing with a pastor is like when there's a problem in Christian culture, but in Jewish culture, that's like, Saturday night. That's just, that debate and discussion is part of it. And so, recognizing that even wrestling with God, that it's actually not meant to be this passive thing. It's this, hey, this looks right to me. How does this look to you? Hey, this seems important to me. And that God, in his beautiful cooperation with us, that he actually has invited us into that kind of debate and discussion with him, with one another. But to me, it's the way that we can kind of prevent from being on the wrong side of it is I find it hard to resolve certainty with the fear of the Lord, because there's always something that he sees that I don't see yet, and that maybe someone else has seen in his nature that I haven't seen yet. And so I can't be certain that every detail of my way is the right way, because I have to always have it open, because I never stop being a disciple, a lifelong learner who's learning more of how to perpetuate his kingdom rather than my own. And so that's really the cutting edge of it to me, is that am I in the wrestle or am I not in the wrestle? Am I stable on this is what I think and this is what it is, or am I willing to engage in the conversation with the Lord and other people about what is this? What does right and wrong really look like?
Which can be a minute by minute practice.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
Like we could connect this whole conversation to even the new age concept. To I've been studying Eve a lot recently because I'm working on my next book, which is not about empires, but it's about being gods and how the temptation, really the first person who fell for the new age temptation was Eve. This is what does the Bible say, is that the fruit looked good for the accruing of wisdom. This will make you like God. And you used to look at somebody like that who was at the peak, the pinnacle of human consciousness. She had no trauma. She had no failure. She had never experienced God not being enough. So all of the classic excuses we want to use to not trust God, as if that's why we're really not trusting God.
Right.
It's like, no, this is a human nature thing.
Yeah.
This isn't because you had a hard past. I know it feels good to say that, but Eve had a perfect past. She had no lack. Everything was perfect. But the Bible says that she saw herself that the fruit looked good and it would make her wise and make her like God. And so she made this decision to, she was the first person who used what God gave her as a gift to serve herself instead of to serve God. That's the new age play right now.
Yeah.
If there was an operating system that was the best operating system for building a successful thing on earth, it would probably be new age. It wouldn't actually be Christianity. It would be new age. Because there's no operating system that gives you as much autonomous power as using the tools of God for your own empire. But when you become submitted, it's the same. There's a way that seems right to man, but in the end, it's death.
Yeah.
You have to really look and be like, okay, I love what you said. This is what I think is right and wrong, but how do you define right and wrong? That can be like a daily, hourly thing.
Totally.
In the moment where like, I think I know what's right. I'm just going to do it. It's like you could be saved, but you fall into a different camp all of a sudden.
Oh, easily.
Which is why I hate the whole certainty thing. Because that was like, well, dude, what do I do now?
Yeah, it's like, okay,
you want a nuance.
Yeah.
This is going to be I could tell this episode is going to be a rich, people are going to have to watch this a few times and go to the Lord with it. It's not as spicy, but this is like the actual soil development.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So, yeah, like you said, this is causing so many questions to come up. So I think the first thing at a fundamental base level that I'm getting from this is like, this is a reminder and a callback to the importance of humility. Because if you don't have it, you're going to get knocked down 100 feet, 200 feet, and it's going to hurt a lot if you're wrong. And you want to be open to being wrong. Simultaneously, you want to also know the voice of, it seems like you have to know the voice of God so well that you don't let anyone ever come against it. So it seems like there are things that we have to pick and choose very carefully that we say, absolutely not. Nothing pushes up against this. And so how do you go about thinking this of like, okay,
like what to be open-handed with and
what to be like, I'm going to hold humility here. But also if you disagree with me, you are the dumbest person on the planet and I cannot be around you because it's not true, and I reject that idea.
I don't think Blake would ever say that.
I don't think so.
I would say that. But what he's trying to ask is like, how do you know what's like to be defended and protected versus what you can have humility? Like if somebody's like, hey, you need to have humility. What if Jesus didn't raise from the dead?
Thank you.
You'd probably be like, eh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose it's almost just, at least for me, and again, I'm very much still a student of how to do this exactly. But to me, it's often finding. So what we're trying to wash off, I think, specifically around this subject, is that we live in an age where one of the greatest values of the empire that we live in right now is, evidence. This is fact-based. This is true. And we're in many ways seeing the end of that empire, because now falsehood can be produced so authentically, so easily, so cheaply, that we're seeing the breakdown of like, we're almost going to this weird, I don't say this in a too doom and gloom way, but we can be going into this dark age of how can you know that anything is true, anything is real? How could this get so bad that it's not even practical to use the internet anymore just because I have no idea, how do I even know whether a news story is real or not? All these kinds of things. It's really it causes us to go inside and actually, I think, present the more authentic reason why we are convicted about something, which is like, I just believe that this is true, that this is just this. I just believe that this is true, that based on, and yeah, you can present the facts of like, hey, based on this scripture, based on this study, based on the lessons I learned from this father, this mother, this is what I believe to be true. And it is a more challenging way to engage, because I think that we have used sometimes facts or certainty as kind of a shield around that actual soft center that's like, I just believe this. This may be offensive to people or not. You can let me know in the comments, I guess. But I actually struggled with my faith around 16 years old. And one of the, which may sound strange to someone who sees angels on a regular basis.
That'd be kind of weird seeing Jesus be like, I don't know. That sounds interesting.
Well, I went in this headspace of like, hey, I could just be a very high functioning schizophrenic. I don't have this symptom and this symptom and this symptom, but I do see stuff all the time, and so maybe I'm just some weird edge case, And so I went through this period where I studied tons and tons of atheist material, and I read all the kind of prominent atheists of the last several years, and now in the middle of that, it's funny, I still had this belief in Jesus the entire time. My mind was going through all this questioning and challenge, but especially looking back now, I can see like that belief actually never really changed. But what I think I was doing was I was, at least in this facet, I'm sure there's many facets I still need to do this, I was peeling off the empirical, the empire version of my Christianity and finding my true Christianity in the midst of that. And that belief thing, even as I chose to engage with all this atheist material, was had this conviction that, okay, if the truth of who Jesus is can't stand up to being challenged, then it probably isn't real or isn't true. And I found bit by bit, as I read that material, as I read about other religions, as I read more, Christian material, and just continued to go through my life, that what became more and more solid in me was this belief, was this faith in me that I can see all these rational arguments for why this is why Christianity is so successful. This is deconstructions of Jesus' miracles, of this, all the stuff, and here's all the harm that Christianity has done. That all of those challenges, are those arguments, kind of tore away some of the walls, some of the towers, some of the other things that I had built up around this core thing. But weirdly, it only made that core thing more strong. Even the concern of like, hey, am I just a high functioning schizophrenic?
Mm-hmm.
I came to this place where, and this may sound strange, where I just didn't really care that much, because seeing these things and seeing the way that I have has continually pointed back to this person that I've just found more and more and more beautiful the more I've gotten to know him, named Jesus, who has a goodness that I'm willing to serve for the rest of my days. And that conviction, about that goodness is really been the core of any kind of structure I've built up around it. And so it's, again, having that willingness to engage, to tear some of those things apart, to recognize the difference between what is that actual pure faith in me versus just the structure that was built up because of the particular church I was in, because of my family norm. It's challenging and it is scary, but in a weird way, I have personally found it to be far more solid than any of those other structures or arguments had ever been.
Yeah.
And when I do, when I do share that with people, I've noticed, and when I can share from that posture, I've noticed that I am shocked by the number of people that are receptive to what I do, that I would expect that would immediately reject a guy who can see angels, Yeah. And so, that's just a lot of the way I've tried to approach it.
Can we talk about something controversial?
Sure.
And then we can cut it later if we want to. When you think about Jesus coming into the city and they're all like, Son of David, Hosanna, there was a belief at the time that this was going to be the guy that got involved politically and helped them restore order to their borders and all of these different things. My concern, and this is something that this you're about to find out why it's controversial, is Christianity, because it's something we mention all the time. You're a Christian, we're all Christians. There seems to be two Christianities right now. One is becoming it's really about what you vote for. It's about how we enforce structure in America. The idea of Christian nationalism has started to come up in topics, and people are asking us questions about it too. And do you see the demonic behind this agenda to sort of create two versions of Christianity? One would be like, Son of David, he's going to come save us from the Romans, and one is like, I'm willing to die for this. Like, how concerned are you, or what are you seeing in terms of like when somebody says Christian nationalism? Is that a principality? Is it an agenda?
Yeah, you are trying to get me canceled, aren't you? I see how it goes now. No, I really don't mind talking about it. No, you don't need to study very much Christian history to recognize that there is a constant pressure to conform to the pattern of this world, to make adjustments to what Christianity is in a way that is more compatible with power at the time. This was what the Roman Catholic Church essentially was. And again, I love my Catholic brothers and sisters, and so I don't consider there's some people who are like, oh, Catholics aren't even Christian. I think that's crazy talk. But as Christianity went from this kind of niche, small group of people that were being oppressed to a national political power, to, in fact, the greatest political power on the earth, you can see how empire worked its way into facets of this godly organization. And that's even what people like Martin Luther were rebelling against and challenging. And so I think we should expect for all of Christianity to have to wrestle with the temptations to conform to God. All the letters that Paul writes to all these churches, he's often dealing with this very thing, that there were in fact some who wanted to create political uprisings against the Romans, during that time. And he was basically like, no, do such good that people will speak of your works. Like basically, take kind of the low road with regard to this. And so, yeah, to be perfectly frank, I'm very concerned about it, because what we see in Jesus, and this was even something his disciples misunderstood constantly, that certainly the Pharisees misunderstood, that was mysterious all the way up to his death, burial, and resurrection, that, okay, the way that Jesus is presenting the perpetuation of power is different than the way that we do it. It's fundamentally different, and we don't like that. We like the action guy, we like the swords and the conquering, and we have to, if we are Christian, if we're truly a Christian, we're disciples of Jesus. So we are trying to follow in his way, and we have to constantly be observing the consequences of our structure, of our belief system. Is this the fruit that would have come from the kind of power that Jesus perpetuated, that he represented in all of those parables. He says the kingdom of heaven is like, the kingdom of God is like. He's telling you how his kingdom works. And if we study those over and over again, is this really how it's meant to work? And I do think that there is a temptation to grasp at human political power as a way of perpetuating the kingdom. And I think that what you will create is just another empire that has some of God's kingdom in it and will accomplish much good, but will also create injustice elsewhere, and maybe something that needs to be corrected later. I'll share a specific story about this in just a second, but this is the struggle that the Israelites had. They were called to be a people that were distinct, that they were God's people. That means they acted differently than the people around them. There's this wrestle of like, hey, all these other people got a king, we need a king. God's like, okay, and especially if you look at the bringing in of idols, there's this whole cycle of like one king brings in all the idols, one king doesn't. That cannot mean very much to us because we don't have that kind of exact one-to-one equation. Well, I think we actually do, but we don't literally, we don't literally have, foreign idols. There's not a big temptation, or there's not a lot of pressure to put a statue of Buddha in our church or something like that,
Right. Yeah.
But you got to understand, from a historical perspectives, the exchange of idols was a symbol of like political connection, building alliances with other nations. This is how one of the ways that power was brokered in that time. That is why there was so much pressure to do so. It wasn't just it didn't fully work the way that it does now, of like, oh, your church started being more New Agey, or your church started adding in all these kind of Eastern mysticism into it. It was also political. It was also, this is how you establish power and connection and get things done in this kingdom. So there was kind of more of a dynamic to it. And so that becomes the question of today is the idols are not as easy for us to see in the same way that it wasn't as easy for them to see in the middle of it when they were choosing to bring these idols into the temple even. And to me, those idols would be, again, anything that's built on the knowledge of good and evil, that is a human construction, and so that's why I'm not wise enough to say, well, that means no Christian should go for political power. I don't think that's the case, but I do see tremendous caution in the mandate of like, okay, all of us Christians should get as much political power as we can so that we can impose our values on this country or any country. That sounds like something that pride would say. That sounds like I'm right and everyone else is wrong. And while that may be true to one degree or another, if we're not doing it the way that Jesus taught us to do it, we're going to need to be corrected by someone else in the future, as I believe the Catholic Church has had to do several times in its existence, as many individual churches have had to do throughout their existence, that as the people of Israel did over and over, that there is judgment, there were judges, there were prophets that had to come and say, hey, you got to get this stuff out of here. And we need people that have courage. I think there's a bit of a backwards challenge to courage these days. You want people to be courageous to say what you want them to say, rather than them to challenge you and to challenge one another to be more like Jesus. And sometimes that means they're going to say something that's different, or that something that you see would be a good outcome or be a good way at getting some power or some great important and maybe even good agenda accomplished. Someone saying, hey, doing it this way will actually lead to future generations having to tear down idols.
Yeah.
We were in the middle of COVID, and it was exciting. There was
fun.
Yeah, we have a really diverse church, which is one of the things I love most about it. But at least in that season, it felt like that diversity of economic diversity, racial diversity, political diversity in our church, and that thing that I had always considered a strength was seeming to be quite a weakness in the middle of that time. Lots of disagreement and everyone telling us what we should and shouldn't do. I was part of the leadership team at that time, and I was seeing so many things influencing people on all different sides. I And so in the middle of all that, one day in my office, I was just like, Lord, what's going on? Immediately I went into this vision, and it was an open vision, and I could see that I was above the United States. I was high up enough that I was above the clouds. I could see the coasts. I could see the major rivers, and I saw these two principalities standing in front of each other. They were massive. They were so big they could walk across the whole United States in probably 5 steps, and they were wearing these great big crowns that were made of this kind of craggly sort of iron and stone. And on the front of the crown of one of the principalities, it said the word Democrat. On the front of the crown of the other principality, it said the word Republican. And I saw this and I just felt this dread, like, oh gosh, it's just all bad, and everyone's wrong. We're just have been deceived into a a self-destructive battle, blah.
Wonderful.
And then I looked more carefully, and I saw that for the demon that had the principality that had the word Democrat on the front of its crown, on the back of the crown was the word Republican. The one that had Republican on the front of its crown had the word Democrat on the back of its crown. And the second I realized that, I heard the Lord say, "This is a spirit of division." And it was the weirdest feeling, because I felt dread when I saw this, like, oh man. And part of it was because of all the pain, the families that weren't talking to each other anymore, like all this division that happened over all the different issues that were going on, And as soon as he said that, all of that dread just like melted away instantly, and it felt so much more simple all of a sudden. Of this is this particular principality that's, I think, still driving a lot of the way that we're going about things. Its goal is to produce division. Something that's very important to understand about demonic stuff, I don't like focusing on it, but is demonic stuff. It is not like demons have these sets of values and they want you to follow these values. There's not demon values and then godly values. They don't care about any of that stuff. They just care about producing destruction. And so that those demons don't care what you believe or what you value. They care that you carry out your beliefs in a way that produces destruction. And so just as I was talking about with Jonah and with Daniel, Jonah obeyed God. He did the right thing. He gave the word. The issue in the book of Jonah is that he was not transformed by the word. So it's not good enough to have the truth or speak the truth. You have to be transformed by the truth. And so even if every value that every person who considers themselves a Christian nationalist or is being a Christian nationalist and maybe wouldn't consider themselves that, everyone that I've ever spoken to who comes to that thing, I pretty much agree with the values that they're trying to do. Where the demonic influence comes in is in, you have to do it this way. You have to do it because you're angry at them. You have to do it because you're scared. You have to do it because you're offended by this. And that just changes the character, changes the way of the response, and it twists the truth into such a way that will actually produce destruction, even though it's still the truth. It's the very thing that I believe happened to me with my friend. This is why those arrows wouldn't pierce through the veil and affect him. Is I had to admit, even though I still to this day don't fully know how to articulate the ways in which I need to be transformed for those specific arrows to be able to land. All those arrows are still true. I still believe every conviction that I was presenting in the middle of that moment. It hasn't changed one bit. But I've not yet been transformed enough to be able to deliver that the way that the Lord would in that moment. I can't say it the way that Jesus would if he was in the room. And so some of it is really, it's really rooted in, okay, it's not about, hey, you're totally on the wrong path and you're thinking the wrong thing necessarily. I think it can often be this very, very subtle, it can, conservative Christians hate this, but we'll often point to, hey, tax collectors, sinners, prostitutes loved being around Jesus. That he treated them with a kind of honor that was offensive to the Pharisees. And of course, a conservative Christian will be quick to say, well, he still corrected and he still did this. It's like, yeah, he's Jesus. He is purifying and cleaning and reshaping every single person that he was around. Absolutely, you're right. If I don't have the same fruit in my life, if the people that hated him the most were the religious elite, were people who had attached political and social power to their religious authority, and so the people that loved him the most were the people that were actually in the most need of transformation. And so, yes, people will kind of come against us. People will challenge the truth, and we undoubtedly will need to defend it. We'll need to stand on those truths and bear witness to the reality of who God is. But if I'm not producing the same result that Jesus did, I just need to hold that in question and hold that in tension. It's not, hey, stop doing what you're doing and don't do that anymore. To me, it's rooted in, okay, I see a discrepancy between the outcome in Jesus' life and my own. On what other side of that? Like, hey, if everyone loves being around me, but they're not being challenged to grow or to be transformed by grace or whatever else, then that's another piece of feedback I need to take. Of like, okay, we want to, if we want to be disciples of Jesus, we need to hunt down those moments where we recognize friction between his nature and ours, and engage in that friction, engage in it with our community. Like, hey, I'm noticing this. Like, what do you think about that? What do you have to say about it? And letting it shape us. So, long answer to a short question. But
that's great, dude. I love how Jesus did it. I love how Jesus does it. I mean, he had Simon and Matthew in the same crew. He had a tax collector and a zealot.
Yeah.
He had a left winger and a right winger in the same group of people, and taught them both. And what one person wanted was a revolution, and what the other person wanted was, to create their own wealth through, and he served them both. And so I think that's the concern right now is like, okay, is this a revival or is this revolution? They don't have the same fruit. So,
yep.
Yeah.
And the beautiful part that makes me less frightened and nervous is God is merciful, and if I think he can pivot a revolution into a revival. I think that he can take a revolution where people seize power and impose their will on others on the earth. And he can send prophets, he can send judges, he can send people to even take that and turn it into something that ends up perpetuating his kingdom more. So God's agenda cannot be stopped, cannot be. And so it's nice because it helps me keep away from getting that space where I was like, I can't do anything. It's like, okay, actually I just, and this is what I want my Christian nationalist friends. This is what I want my liberal friends. This is what everyone to do, is just, this is what I'm convicted about with regard to Christ's nature and how I'm supposed to follow it. Let me just go after it and do my best, and just be humble, be open to feedback. And it's when we're plugging the ears and just sprinting forward that we're gonna, run off a cliff or something like that. It's okay, who gives me feedback? Who gives me challenge? Am I liking this fruit? Am I not liking this fruit? And just being challenged by that all the time.
Nice. You got anything, or you want to keep going?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, from your experience, even with the experience with your friend that you shared at the beginning of this episode, you've got consecration and you've got division. And then you also have the side of Jesus he's loving on people like that don't believe what he believes. And Taylor, you mentioned this recently when you were on the call the other week. You said it's important, like obviously unity commands a blessing, but then Holy Spirit said to you, unity for what?
Yep.
And so I think specifically in this moment, it feels important to address, like, Blake, specifically, how do you balance, like, you're able to see the spirit of division and what it looks like. What's the difference between division versus like consecration, and who you hang out with and who you don't? Like, how have you learned to make those decisions? How do you compartmentalize what roles those people play in your life? Because I would assume the people that believe very differently than you probably don't allow as much influence. Like, you have a compartmentalization. So it'd be great to address that a little bit.
Yeah, just like we were talking about with media, I think different people are going to have different capacities for different things. I tend to have a pretty, because of my makeup, I have a pretty high capacity for people that think radically different than me. Partially because of what I went through when I was a teenager. I'm used to having a lot of ideas thrown at me and being able to consider them without accepting them. And so I have a very high capacity for that. Not everyone does, and not everyone should necessarily. And so, despite that, I'm definitely very thoughtful about who I let influence me and who I don't let influence me. For me personally, it is somewhat easy to have a difference between I'm trying to listen and understand versus be influenced by, and so that's a pretty easy switch to switch on and off with regard to people. And again, in the same way that we were kind of talking about this side of, okay, is the fruit of me, of my life, that people who are sinners, people who are in that kind of state, they're attracted to me, they're attracted to what I'm bringing. In the same way, we can look at, am I distinct from the world around me? Like, do I have a set of convictions that dictate my behavior? This is another place I think I would really encourage people to study the book of Daniel. Like, this is a story about this. This is a prophet who is sent to the middle of a wicked empire. And the whole, especially the first part, is this wrestle between how to remain distinct. He was given a Babylonian name. He seemed to accept that. Some of us in modern context are like, you shouldn't have taken the Babylonian name. Your name is Daniel. Stand up for that. He allowed himself, whether he had an option or not, to take on a Babylonian name. He didn't eat the Babylonian food. That was part of his conviction, part of what made him distinct in his covenant with God. And so he said, hey, we can only eat this kind of food. And there was tension there. He had to work it out and was able to do it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that was their Babylonian names. We're not going to bow down to this golden idol. That crosses the line. We're not going to do that just for cultural appropriateness. We're just not doing this one. This violates this thing, that faith, that belief, that thing inside of me. This violates that. And so I'm not doing that, even if it costs me. Even if it costs me, this is how I'm choosing to live. And this happens again with Daniel. It's how he ends up in the lion's den. All these things of this tension between remaining distinct yet being in this place. And so I think, again, it's in the tension of if I'm talking about something with me personally where, okay, I'm having a conviction, should I do it this way? Should I do it that way? There's a very small set of people that I'll pull from that I know have a value for that center core of faith that I have, because I'm looking for influence about that. That's very, very deep inside of me. There's other parts that are more not the actual faith itself, but the expressions of that faith, and even further, the further expressions of that and outer edges of what that looks like in my life, that I'll let a little bit more wider expression or influence in, because that expression of faith can change a whole lot without changing this centerpiece. But there's very few people that I will engage with in a way that where I'm looking for influence to influence that very, very centerpiece. It's honestly probably three to five people that I have in my life that I would engage in that particular way. So if we look at our life and recognize, I'm not that distinct from the world, from people around me, then that's another thing we ought to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves, so to speak.
Got it. Okay.
Wow.
Speaking of this stuff on the daily, like boots on the ground, you can turn your gift off, from what I understand.
Off and on, yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Do you turn it on frequently?
Pretty frequently. I naturally am kind of an observer. I like to understand. I like to see what's going on, and so pretty regularly.
Okay. Have there been times when you've turned it off and turned it on and wish you wouldn't have?
Not really, because even when I see something negative or I see something challenging, again, occasionally it's temporarily disturbing, but the Holy Spirit always has something to say about that. And again, what he has to say is always good and is always comforting, always brings clarity. So I will say, just on the small scale, there are contexts in which that I've noticed, like, okay, this is not supposed to be used in this way at this time. Like, just as a very brief example, my wife and I were in an argument once, or an elevated discussion, we'll say. And
oh boy,
it's one of those ones where like, okay, she's not hearing me, I'm not hearing her. Of course, in the moment, I was just thinking she's not hearing me, but hindsight, this is 2020. But we're in those moments, and I have this. We were very young, first married, and I suddenly had this thought of like, if I just kind of stretched out with these prophetic senses a little bit and understood what was going on with her a little bit more, I might be able to, more accurately get my point across. That wouldn't be a bad thing, would it? And as soon as I kind of like went to go look in the spirit, reached out with kind of like prophetic senses, it felt like I bumped into a brick wall. And immediately I heard the Holy Spirit say, I did not create the prophetic to replace communication.
Oh.
And I realized like, okay, with certain relationships, in certain contexts, I'm still the prophetic person that I am, but I'm meant to be that very differently than I would be when I'm out observing things in public or ministering or whatever else. And so in that sense, I would regret turning it on in that moment, because it was like, okay, this is not, to be very blunt about what I would have been doing if I had gone through with that. It was like, I'd be trying to manipulate my wife with prophetic skill. That's wouldn't have been a good move. And I'm grateful that I got a little bop on the nose for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. Jake, write that one down for later.
Don't use prophecy against your wife.
Heather was telling me about a story where you saw a demon in a movie theater.
No, I remember I had all sisters growing up, and so I was persuaded to go to very many romantic comedies in my young life, and we were a big movie family, so we go to movies pretty frequently. And I remember we went to this one movie. I don't even remember which one it was, but it was a romantic comedy kind of thing, and I'm sitting through it and we're watching it. And just out of curiosity, I kind of started looking in the spirit, and first my eyes were drawn to this kind of group of young girls, early 20s or whatever, that were maybe even younger, but they were sitting down on the side over there, and I could see just kind of this textured light, kind of coming out of the screen that was going towards these girls, and I saw this demon there, and it was taking this textured light and kind of bending it and twisting it and creating just these quick snapshots of like, sort of classic, like knight in shining armor, Prince Charming, all things kind of like that. And I could tell like, oh, it's manipulating this story to try to create unhealthy expectations about romance, about what love is, stuff that would actually cause harm, cause destruction, that maybe isn't bad in and of itself as an idea, but if it's built up the wrong way, we can all imagine, how that would create a harmful expectation that would actually cause destruction in their life. And so one could say, okay, well then this is a bad movie, but then I turn and look over here, and there's an older married couple sitting there. I see this textured light coming out of the screen, and as it goes to them, instead I see these beautiful images being produced of, and it actually is the two of them like walking on the beach, going on a date, having a picnic, just this stuff like that. And I see nothing but goodness being perpetuated around them. This thing that's like just refreshing, reminding them of their connection and their romance together. And so it is this kind of reality that we often experience that, okay, this piece of media is what it is, and it could be filtered in such a way that causes harm to this person, but is actually of benefit to this person. And I'm sure there's some media that was probably harmful to everybody or harmful to many more people, but it's this recognition that a part of it is just the stage that we're in, what part of life we're in, how we're able to take that in. That is really what affects how it changes how it affects us.
Is there anything we can do to control that? Like if there's a demon messing with the way we perceive something, like what do we do?
I think it's simple is really just practicing awareness. Like this can happen in a conversation. This can happen when we're watching a movie, reading a book, anything else. Like pausing, like how is this affecting me right now? Is it positive or negative? Is this even, hey, I'm seeing a news story about something that's really sad or really, really offensive or whatever else. Okay, what is this doing to me right now? Yeah. Is this causing a spirit of division? Is this causing is this making me hate? And now it takes a tremendous amount of intellectual honesty to be able to do this, because we don't like the idea that we would have bad thoughts or bad beliefs or bad feelings. So it takes a tremendous amount of humility and honesty to be like, oh man, this is making me hate this person. Like we would never, we think of hate as being so bad, which of course it is, that we, rather than fully avoiding hate, we'll just call it something else, and so recognizing, okay, there's nothing wrong with being angered by something. Like, Jesus got angry. Anger is a perfectly healthy reaction to injustice of any kind, so anger isn't wrong. Okay, is it tilting into hate? Is it tilting into a destructive form of anger? Okay, being afraid is a normal emotion. If I saw a bear break through the window right now, which seems unlikely, but
it could happen.
It could always happen. I would feel afraid, and that is a good emotion that would help me run.
I would save you.
Gotcha. So maybe I wouldn't feel afraid because you'd be there to take care of it.
I'm good with bears, dude. I know how to.
And okay. But we can easily recognize how fear can be twisted, can be exacerbated, can turn into paranoia, can turn into these other things. And so, again, it's back to that empire thing again. It's like, there's always good parts in this, or in an emotion and in a way of thinking. But can I pause and truly recognize, is this producing a good version of this or a bad version of this? It might be perfectly just that I would get angry at this thing that happened or this situation. But is it leading me to hate, to division, to things that are actually going to perpetuate destruction? And so the other part too that is so important, and these people are rare, is people that can give you feedback, people that can look at you from the outside and say, hey man, this is not producing goodness in you. Like the way you're saying this, the way you're coming up with this, like, hey, yeah, there's something off here. And that takes a lot of mutual trust and maturity to be able to build that up with someone.
When you see these things, do you ever pray specifically against them? Like, do you pray warfare at all, or like, how do you deal with what you see?
Yeah, I don't very often pray warfare type prayers. At least unless I'm feeling led by the Holy Spirit to do so. I believe if in that moment I, very awkwardly walked over there and prayed away the demon of deception or false expectations, whatever I wanted to call it in that moment, we have authority, it would go away. That would not really do anything to change the vulnerability that was being taken advantage of in that particular moment.
Got it.
And so maybe praying that would have been helpful, but since we're not in any kind of relationship or context where I could actually walk towards the undoing of the vulnerability that demon was taking advantage of, I'm hesitant to do so because I just don't think it'll do that much. It's like the equivalent of, chasing away birds that are eating a bunch of food that's on the ground. It's like, well, as soon as I'm gone, the birds are coming back and eating this. Like, if I really want to take care of this, I need to stop and clean up all this food, and so if I'm not willing to do that or able to do that, then I'm less compelled to do so. But in context where I have a relationship with the person, I have some authority in their life, I'm much more likely to let them know, to pray with them, to talk it through a little bit, and talk about, hey, what's attracting this, or where's this vulnerability coming from?
So in some regards, does that paint the picture that deliverance is somewhat overrated at times? Like if you just go to a deliverance minister and get cleaned up, there structurally something has to be changed.
Yeah, I have a great value for deliverance, and so I don't want to say that the whole thing is overrated. I think that we can get into a context where we're just chasing the birds away over and over and over and over again. And the authority of God is such, and the authority that has been delegated to us is such that you can chase those birds away every time. But again, if we haven't changed what's attracting them, then that is overrated, because if I don't change, then I'm really fighting an endless battle. And so that chasing away of birds is important, because sometimes we're in a stage or we've been stuck in the cycle of that problem for so long that we can't even tell where up and down is anymore. And so we need that freedom and stuff chased out first. So I absolutely value deliverance ministry for those purposes. It's just usually not built to be the ongoing healing process. That's gets more into like the counseling, therapy, relationships, pastoral care, all those things that will really build up the stuff that will just make it so those birds don't have a place to land anymore.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah,
That is awesome.
Yeah.
What's this the story that I don't know where you shared this, of the angel pacing in front of the girl and Jesus showing up and she had chains, and
Yeah.
do you know where this was? And
Yeah. So no, this is one of the more impactful stories I'd ever experienced in my life. I'll share a brief version of it because it is a long story. But I was 15 years old, and I'll share it in this context as we were talking about it. This was right in the middle of me struggling with my faith and you know, reading atheist books. And like I said, I was struggling with my faith here. That core of faith didn't really change all that much. So I was still going to church. I was still, you know, going through all these practices and everything. But we went on a mission trip to England, and at the end of the mission trip, we went to a big conference that was being held outside London. And last night of the conference, we were going to be flying out the next day. So I was pretty tired, and we were up back on the back upper deck in the conference center there, and I was leaning up, putting my feet up, and honestly, thinking I might catch a quick nap before it was over. And I noticed the preacher, you know, start inviting people up to the front to receive Jesus for the first time. And I looked down, and I, for the very first time in my life, saw Jesus. He was there pacing at the front in the margin between the stage and the chairs, just pacing back and forth. And I could tell by the way that he was pacing that he was staring at something at the back of the room. It was like a hunter almost, like his gaze was absolutely fixed at this one point. Every time he turned, his eyes stayed locked in this one spot. And I followed his line of sight, and I saw this girl, and immediately when I saw her, I knew he was looking at her. There was this divider between where the stadium seating started and the regular chairs, and she was leaning down with her head on the divider. And immediately when I saw her, I heard the Holy Spirit say, "He sees no one but her." And there was just such an intensity and purposefulness to the way that he was walking that it almost felt like unnecessary systems were shutting down just so that I could focus more on what he was doing, on the way that he was walking. And so it was distantly that I heard the preacher again invite people up to receive Jesus for the first time. But as soon as I heard that, my eyes immediately snapped to the girl. And I saw him move, but it didn't take him any time to get there. Jesus was pacing at the front, and then he was standing right there in front of her. And as he stood there, she lifted her head up off the divider for just a second. But as soon as she did, I saw all these chains appear all around her. They were covering her from the top of her neck to the bottom of her ankles. They went off in 4 long strands, and these demons kind of pulled or were at the end of each of the chains, and they pulled and twisted it in such a way that it caused her to slump back down. And but that didn't really matter, because Jesus just leaned forward and he kissed her on the forehead. And the second he kissed her on the forehead, every single link in the chain exploded like firecrackers all the way down. The demons flew back from the loss of tension. And as the last link near her ankles broke, there was this bright flash of white light. It was so bright, it completely blinded me. I couldn't see anything, and my vision slowly faded back in. But when it did, I couldn't see the stadium. I couldn't see the chairs. I looked down and I couldn't even see myself. All I could see was Jesus and this girl. And she was now, she'd just been wearing some kind of normal clothes, but now she was wearing these robes that were like whiter than white, the whitest thing I've ever seen before or since. And Jesus was standing there. Jesus was standing there with his arms open wide, and she leaned in and she hugged him around the waist. And as I saw that, I felt this sense of heaviness from above me, and I looked up, and I saw this hand coming down. It was big. Each finger was about as big around as a baseball bat. This hand came down. It touched me on the forehead, and the moment it touched me on the forehead, all of reality snapped back into place, like the stadium chairs, everything. I found myself standing. I'm not entirely sure when that happened, but I stumbled backwards and fell into my chair. And kind of got my wits about me just enough to sit up to see that the girl was actually running up to the front to receive Jesus, even though she already had. Now, so that was a cool thing to see, and that was amazing. But what really changed me, and what honestly was kind of the start to the core values that I've always had with regard to seeing in the Spirit, and was really not the conclusion, but the beginning of resolving this tension I had with my faith, is what happened right afterwards. So I'm sitting there, and my body feels crazy, like I feel like a truck ran over me, just with the intensity of all of that. And so I sitting there for a while, then all of a sudden everyone stands up and starts walking away. And I'm like, oh, I guess it ended at some point. And it was like a camp out kind of situation. So there was all these tents around this indoor stadium that they had there. So I'm pretty good at getting lost in broad daylight. So I was not entirely confident in my ability to get back to the correct set of tents that the youth group was staying at. So I got up and I looked around. I saw one of the girls from my youth group, and I'm like, okay, if I just kind of keep my eyes fixed on her, I'm not going to get too lost. And there's about 3,000 kids at this thing, so it's a whole big crowd all leaving the stadium at once. And I'm just trudging through, feeling still like I got run over, just like focusing on this girl. Now, I knew this girl. She was in our youth group. We weren't close friends or anything, but as I'm still feeling the heat from what I had just seen, and I'm focusing on her, all of a sudden, as I'm looking at her, I see everything there is to know about her life. I see every decision she's ever made. I see every moment of joy, every moment of peace, every moment of fear, every moment of pain. They just pop through my mind, pop, 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 one right after the other, just flowing through my mind. And again, it's images, but it feels like memories. Like I can feel the emotion behind each one, as if this was a dear friend or a sibling. And then as that just kind of kept going, all of a sudden I saw her entire future. I saw every decision she would make. I saw all the decisions that she could make. I saw all of her potential. I saw the perfect path that the Lord had laid out for her. I saw which parts of that she would choose and which parts of that she would not choose. And all of this, her past, her present, her future, it swirled together into this just overwhelming feeling of love. It was the most profound sense of love that I'd ever felt in my entire life. It literally felt like it was too big for my mind to conceptualize. And so it felt like it was stretching the capacity of my ability to think with the just magnitude of this reality of love I felt towards this person. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point that it felt physically painful. And so I just kind of snapped my eyes away from her and looked away. But as soon as I did, there was another person walking to me, someone I had never met before. And as soon as my eyes were fixed on them, I saw everything there was to know about their life, every decision they'd ever made, every decision they would make, fullness of their potential, how far they were going to make it along that line of potential. And again, felt completely and totally in love with this person. So much so intensely that I couldn't handle it, that I once again pulled away. But then I looked at another person and saw everything there was to know about their life. Looked at another person, saw everything there was to know about their life. And as I mentioned, I'm in a very large crowd, so I'm ping-ponging from person to person to person. It's happening faster and faster. The intensity with which it's building up, happening quicker and quicker and quicker. And again, I call this a feeling of love, but it really felt like more than that. It didn't want anything from these people, but it demanded to be expressed to them. I wanted to kiss them. I wanted to hug them. I wanted to pray for them. I wanted to prophesy over them. I wanted to pick them up in the air and spin them around. I wanted to grab them by their face and scream how much God loved them. But anytime I thought of anything to do in response to this love, it was so painfully and woefully inadequate in comparison to that love, that it felt like it would be wrong to do something so small in the face of something so big. And because of that, I felt paralyzed. And so finally, I got a bright idea and looked straight at the ground. And so I'm trudging through this crowd of 3,000 people staring at my shoes when, I kid you not, someone's foot kicks in front of me and I see everything there is to know about their life.
Oh my gosh.
Every decision they've ever made. I see the fullness of their potential and how far they're going to make it that along that line of potential.
Dear Lord.
And again, I fall completely and totally in love with this person before I even see their face. And so somehow I made it back to our tents, fell down face first in my pillow, and thank God when I woke up the next day, it was gone, because I really don't know how I would have been able to function out of that. And, you know, I haven't always talked about this. I've shared that story a lot, but I haven't always shared about the context in which I experienced it, because even afterwards, the intensity of that was so great, and the profundity of it was so great. I was still in the middle of that wrestle with the construction of my faith. And to be perfectly honest, it wasn't like a singular solution where I was just like, okay, great, now I know everything I believe is true. I even rationalized it as like, hey, I've grown up in the church. My mind could still have produced imagery that resulted in that could happen. You know, none of that isn't something that I couldn't have produced on my own necessarily. And, you know, but again, this was the first time I had that experience of like, I just don't really care if that's the case or not, because the goodness, the love, the adoration, the capacity to handle the full breadth of a human story, to both have created a perfect path for someone, yet still fully accept them in the reality that they would choose parts of it and not choose parts of it, and still be faithful enough to provide that perfect path, knowing they wouldn't choose all of it. The response to seeing someone's potential, seeing how far they'd make that along that potential, and realizing how all of us don't really always do the best that we possibly could, but still feeling that the response to that is an adoration so profound that I couldn't handle it. I just came to the belief that I whether this is a delusion or anything else, I don't really care. That level of goodness is worth my entire life, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to serve that goodness and express that goodness to others. And in the years after that, I ended up, you know, coming to reattach much of the faith that I had grown up with. And yes, some of it changed and reshaped and adjusted a little bit, but really that core never changed, because that core is his nature. And really, even with all this that we're talking about with these grand empires and all of these details, all the worry that we can have about how to, and I can still very easily get in that headspace of like, how can I even say anything? You know, it's okay. It's not really what it's about. It's about his nature. How can I be transformed by this enough that I can release some more of this on the earth? And if I can do even just a little bit of that, then it's worth it. And yep, I'm going to make tons of mistakes. I'm going to build all kinds of empires of my own, and my children and their children will have to reconstruct and deconstruct them and repair them. But if I even add one more board of God's kingdom, of something that is rooted in something that good, that loving, then it's worth even the mistakes that I'll make along the way.
That's amazing. Such a great story. All right, 2 more questions.
Yeah.
One is easy, one is hard. We'll land. So you've studied, obviously, theology, seems to have a good base understanding. I'm assuming you've probably studied philosophical ideas and history and all this stuff. What about the rapture? People thought they were getting raptured like 2 weeks ago.
Oh my goodness.
I saw it.
I'm still here.
Wow.
I haven't really studied it, to be honest. So what's your take as somebody who sees everything in the spirit realm?
Well, I definitely don't know everything for sure. And I also know I don't see everything in the spirit realm. I see a lot, but definitely not everything. But it's funny. When I was in my late teens, I got ambitious and wanted to like teach a small class to the other youth group about the book of Revelation. And I had kind of just gone along with the traditional view, at least was normal in my tradition, of like, you know, pre-tribulation rapture, basically, you know, left behind. Yeah. Basically just left behind. So I'm like, okay, yeah, well, I'm going to teach you. Let me actually study. It was the first time I really studied, got into the background. And I've obviously have a little bit of a nerdy side. I like to learn, I like to study. And to be perfectly frank, as I got, even at that age, as I got into the study of like who had, come to these conclusions and what they were based on, I realized that like, oh, this whole interpretation of these scriptures is actually pretty flimsy. Like and of course I'm talking about the very specific like pre-tribulation rapture, like everyone suddenly disappears. If you really study how that doctrine came to be and what it's built on and what the actual scriptures that they base that on, it's in my view pretty flimsy. If it happens that way, great. I'll be like, okay, whoops, I was wrong. I'm totally open to that. But for me, there just wasn't, when I really looked at it, I was genuinely surprised, at least in my environment, how ubiquitous it was for how thin the doctrinal support for it was. And I'm like, oh, wow, I think most people just have found these pieces of media that have supported this very convincing and not actually looked at what the basis of it is, And so the other thing too, I kind of take on a more grand scale, especially, and I take this for the whole book of Revelation, anything to do with eschatology, is I've always tried to pay attention to the cautionary tale of the Pharisees, of like, these were people who studied scripture more than anyone else, and they missed their Messiah. They, in fact, conspired against him. And we can make fun of them for that, or we can say, hey, wait a minute, like I'm a person who makes a study of scripture. I might need to learn from some of these mistakes and be cautious not to make the same. One of my early Bible teachers said something to me that has always stuck with me with regard to understanding prophecy, and especially biblical prophecy, is he said, hey, Blake, let's pretend like I erased your mind of any knowledge of Jesus. I said, that's a very evil thing to do. Why would you do that? But let's just pretend you don't know anything about Jesus, you don't know anything about the New Testament, and I'll hand you all of the biblical prophecies about the Messiah, and you're going to draw me a picture of what the Messiah looks like. You're going to write down the story of this is what the Messiah is going to do. Do you think you're going to write down anything close to Jesus? And in my limited understanding, in my limited view, the answer was I probably wouldn't even get anywhere close to what Jesus actually did. N.T. Wright has a lot of several wonderful books that kind of illustrate this very, very beautifully. Things like Surprised by Hope or The Day the Revolution Started, that really illustrate like this was a very surprising version of the fulfillment of these prophecies. You probably would not. You would have made some of those assumptions of he's going to be a powerful political leader who raises armies and conquers all these wicked empires and imposes his own rule upon the earth. And Jesus is a shocking and beautiful inversion of that. And so after that teacher of mine had showed that to me, I realized like, okay, I have to be very, very careful about being presumptive about any biblical prophecy that I would apply to my day. The temptation to take these circumstances that I'm in and nitpick and cherry pick the pieces of biblical prophecy that could be crowbarred to fit into these circumstances is very great. And chances are, at least what I would expect, is that the return of Jesus and the full establishment of his kingdom and all of those biblical prophecies that I 100% believe are true, I would actually expect that the way that Jesus would accomplish that and what that would look like may be radically different than what we would expect if we just studied those prophecies on their own. And so because of that, I approach all of this with a very open hand of, and again, very humbly, again, if it happens exactly as the Left Behind books, or anyone else illustrated, then yeah, whoops, that's great, But to me, and even deeper than that, to me, I also think that, especially things like the rapture, you have relatively small things like people, selling their cars or getting rid of stuff, and like, okay, because we're going to be raptured, is you can see the small levels of harm that it can do, but it can do some bigger ones too. Just that disappointment and that it really comes back to that empire building thing again, is, okay, do I have faith in Jesus, or do I have faith in this man's interpretation of the Bible? And sometimes if we don't pay attention, we don't realize, like, oh, I don't actually have much faith in Jesus. All my faith is on what my pastor taught me when I was 16, and that probably was to some percentage the true nature of Jesus, and probably to some percentage stuff that was mistakes, misunderstandings. And so it doesn't mean we throw everything out. It means we stop holding it so tightly that the Holy Spirit can't shift and adjust and refine our understanding of who he is. And so, so personally, I would expect biblical prophecy to be fulfilled in a way that is far different than we would expect. And so the best way to prepare ourselves for that is to continue to be refined by the nature of Jesus.
Or just make predictions, then expect the opposite.
That could work too. Yes.
That's good. The statistical randomness, that'll play.
That'll work.
Last question. You have so much experience seeing things as they happen. The stories that you have are awesome. But in your own life, when you go through something that, and you can share an example if you want to, or you don't have to, but I would have to imagine that being able to see things in the Spirit has not prevented you from having to walk through disappointing seasons, disappointing challenges. And so I think people have to be careful to sometimes think like, well, if I could just see it, I would be able to fix it. And if I can fix it, I can avoid it. And we're almost looking for this like easy way out, this hack.
Yeah.
So is there an example or a secret that you have of like, how do you walk through disappointment well? Being able to see what you can see. How do you reconcile this experience and this knowledge that you have with the fact that still sometimes your life doesn't look the way you wanted it to look or thought it would look?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're very right. And it's something that's so important, especially when any group that talks about supernatural stuff is, I think we get very mistaken if we start to treat any form of the supernatural, what we call the supernatural, to be a shortcut to skip hard things. Some of those hard things are part of reality. Some of those hard things are obstacles that God put to help us grow. I don't believe he sends, horrible things to us. He's not a wicked father, but a good father will allow challenge and obstacles in our life to help us grow, to help us mature, And so, it's funny too, because this is so evident in the Bible. Like David was this man after God's own heart and made so many poor decisions and mistakes and challenges. We don't even like to talk about that, but it's reality. These prophets, Elijah, people who did crazy things happen, also got super discouraged and were just like depressed in a cave for a while. It's like, from our perspective, we're like, hey, you just like had all this fire come down, all this stuff. Like, you should be doing great. And it's like, this is the reality of the experience. Like, there's so much uncertainty and unclarity. And I I don't remember if I talked about this all last time, but 2 years ago, we my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, passed away very suddenly. He had a heart condition, so we knew there was some danger around that. But he'd been going to the doctor and looking, and everything seemed like it was okay. And just fell down dead. And obviously it's devastating for our family, devastating for my sister. Hugely painful. And I've done this long enough that I'm not even really tempted to go into this place, but I didn't try to see in the Spirit to see like, here's why this happened, here's how we could have prevented this happen, here's the way in which that we're supposed to undo or change or whatever else this happening. I honestly, and I thankfully had been in a place where I was learning some of this already. And we don't value this, especially as men and especially in a Western culture. A moment like that was a moment where I had to allow myself to be terribly weak. Like, this is devastating. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help. I don't know how to process this. I just need to be weak in my Father's arms. I just need to invite the comfort of the Holy Spirit. I need to allow myself to feel as powerless as I do. It doesn't mean there weren't things that I did know to do, to help. But it doesn't mean I didn't know that, okay, hey, they lived in California at that time. So I'm flying out to California tomorrow. Yeah, I'm going to take as much time off work as I need to, just be here and be in this process. So yeah, of course I know stuff to do, but engaging with that reality of like, in the middle of this, I have no idea what to do. I know these few actions that I can do. I know some solutions, but just allowing myself to feel that pain, allowing myself to be weak, allowing myself to face the reality that I am weak in this place, in this moment. It's only in that I can experience the comfort of Jesus. In that place, I'm not a prophet to the nations. I'm just a son who's had something very scary and sad happen, who's running to his dad, And so allowing ourselves to be that. And also accepting that I haven't had an answer from God as to why that happened. I could go into things, I could pick things, I have some thoughts and conclusions, but one of my favorite books of the Bible, that's a great mysterious one, but it's really about this whole subject we've been talking about, is the book of Job. Job has this calamity come upon his life, a huge calamity, and all of his buddies come around and say different versions of more or less the same thing. Hey, we know how justice works. God does good things for good people and bad things to bad people. And, they have some nuance, and like this one's like, oh, you might have done something bad in the future and he's punishing you for that. Or, hey, you must have done something in your past. Hey, maybe your great grandfather did something bad and this is, that. And Job is like, hey, I don't see any of that. I don't know any of that. And then finally, of course, God shows up and he doesn't answer the question. He basically just says, look at my creation, look at its vastness. You can't even understand the breadth and depth of this thing that I have created. You also can't know who I am, basically in beautiful poetic language saying, I'm God and you're not. Now we could very easily, and I think many of us probably have, looked at that and be like, man, God's a real jerk. Like all this stuff happens and he just shows up and is like, hey, I'm the boss, But what's fascinating is after this big display, Job responds by basically saying, hey, you're right. I misspoke. You're God. I'm not. I stand corrected. And as I understand it, I don't know ancient Hebrew, but as I understand it in the original language, there's a couple different ways to say I stand corrected. One of them is like, yes, sir. One of them is, a little bit more strict. But this one is one that could probably be accurately translated as, I am corrected and comforted, like the way that you would respond to a coach who believes in you, or maybe a loving mother correcting you. And it goes in, of course, to things being restored to Job, and it uses this beautiful language at the end that concludes with, and Job died an old man full of days. And I think that part of not eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil again and again is especially in these disappointments, whether they're small ones that still impact us heavily or big devastating ones, that we recognize, okay, we are finite beings and he is an infinite being. We can't even fathom the full understanding of his creation, much less can we fathom him. He is still merciful and good and has chosen to make himself relatable to us. But simultaneously, he's God and we're not. And I can look at that response that Job received and be like, man, God was a real jerk. Or I can see the way that Job responded, that he was corrected and comforted. And then his life grew into this beautiful and mature thing at the end of his days. And I can say, okay, there is some sort of posture of heart. There's something that Job saw in that conversation that I maybe didn't see or missed, that actually brought comfort to this tragedy that he had been through. And so I want to seek that posture in my relationship to him, even in the midst of devastation, is, okay, I don't know why. I could jump to all these conclusions. I have all these philosophies that could give me reasons. They make sense, but none of it is the answer. And so I'm just actually resting in your God. I'm not, and trying to posture myself where that is actually an answer that brings comfort and peace rather than offense in my heart.
That's great. Love that. Anything else, bro?
One question I've just had on my mind for the past probably 30 minutes is like, so much of what you do is discerning. Your gift of discernment also has to be about as high as your gift of sight, I would imagine. How are you teaching that to your kids?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I'm still working out regularly.
Yeah.
I try to teach my kids how to ask questions and how to consider multiple things and how to and I think we all learn this as well, that some of them are so young that even engaging with God in a real personal way, they do it in the childish way, which is actually beautiful in its own way. We're just that childlike faith. But even challenging them to raise their discernment with one another of like, kids have lots of little conflicts, like, she took my bear. He stepped on my car.
Big deals.
You just you just punched me in the face for no reason, And I'll say things like, "Hey, what do you think they were thinking?" Or "Why did you think they did that?" Or "Hey, what do you think they need right now?" Or just basically challenging them to heighten their awareness of what's going on in front of them and to recognize, okay, yeah, and it's normal childlike behavior. Like, I have been affected negatively. I have been, I have been insulted. You have taken my bear, and there will be repercussions. And they don't say it that way, but that's basically what it is.
Me first.
And so inviting them into, let's discern what's going on here. Let's see what's going on. Hey, why do you think they did that? And even in church, in ministry, as they run into things in life, as they run into other kids in school, like, hey, what do you think's going on behind that? And not just cognitively trying to figure it out, but trying to perceive, like stretch those senses to be more considerate of, hey, what's actually going on here?
Love it. That's so helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly.
Thanks for coming out, man.
Oh, happy to be here.
I'm excited to read your book.
It's coming out. It's coming out February. I forget the date, but look for it in February. You can pre-order it before then. It's called Through the Veil.
Amazing. And you have a Patreon that you're doing teaching on.
Yeah. No, it's been a really, really fun. Been doing it for almost two years now. It's been really, really cool. So if you go to patreon.com/Blake Healy, I've just been building a community of people who want to learn more about seeing in the Spirit, activate the gift of seeing in the Spirit, want to just build a community around those things. And so there's different tiers that people can hop into. We have live discussion every single month, multiple times. We have lessons that come out every month. And now we have like hours and hours of training material on there that you can hop on and go through. We also actually just launched groups that can actually get together and go through the content together, so you don't have to just be passively watching something at home. You can get in a group and discuss it together and do some activations together. So it's been really, really cool. So yeah, if you want to check that out, it's patreon.com/Blake Healy.
Let's go. Awesome. Thank you guys. Love you all. Leave us any comments you want us to send to Blake, as long as they're nice. And we'll see you next week.